Unless you've been hiding under a rock, by now you know David Njoku is an LA Charger after his long stint with the Cleveland Browns. With Oronde Gadsden going into his second year playing tight end for the LA Chargers and the signing of Charlie Kolar from the Ravens, who's going to be the tight end one in 2026? As we get into our continuing coverage, our ESP evaluation this week, the tight ends. Let's get into it. So we are now in part 4 of our ESP evaluations of the offseason 2026. We are now talking the tight ends today, ladies and gentlemen. So who's going to be the top tight end in 2026? That is the question. I did a nice, interesting, and exciting video from my perspective about David Njoku coming into the fold in the offseason when they signed him, a few weeks ago. So we got that going for us as an added bonus to the room. Oronde Gadsden II is going to year 2, coming off a really solid rookie campaign. A lot of people didn't expect for him to do much of anything based upon who he was drafted, right? But, with his NFL pedigree, his lineage, his dad playing in NFL previously for the Dolphins in his space in his time in the NFL. He had that going for him, and he knew what it took to be a pro player. So he had that leg up. So he was able to get on the field and produce and be a target and be a weapon for Justin Herbert in 2025. So can he build on that in 2026 is a good question to ask, especially with David Njoku coming into the building. They got Charlie Kolar from the Ravens, mainly a blocking style tight end in his career. So what is he going to mean for this offense? And the overarching catalyst to all this, and Mike McDaniel. What does he want to do with these particular tight ends and how he's going to utilize them, how he's going to deploy them is going to be the question. But let's talk about each and every guy's attributes, their areas of improvement they need to work on to get things rolling in 2026. And I'll give you my prediction and who I think is going to be ultimately the tight end one in that perspective. And is it going to be Oronde? Is it going to be David? Who is it going to be? I'm not going to say I'm going to put my money on Charlie Kolar because he hasn't done much in the receiving conversation yet. But he might have a hidden talent. They just didn't unleash him in Baltimore. We don't know. So we'll see. But let's break down everybody from top to bottom, all 3 tight ends. Scott Medlock is necessarily is still listed as a tight end, but we're not going to even put that in the conversation. That needs to go away. Just go back to the defensive side of football, be a DT, man. We don't need you on this side of football. And I'm sure Mike McDaniel doesn't like the idea of having a D lineman play tight end for his offense. That's just me. That's just my speculation. But we'll get over that. So starting with Oronde Gadsden, they said great, campaign. In 2025, he's 6'5", 236 pounds. Listed on ESPN. That's an interesting conversation too, because I think he called himself at being 250-ish at the start of last season, but they still have him listed as in the 230s. It's a little bit undersized for my money as a tight end in this league. Really big stature, obviously 6'5". He's a former wide receiver turned tight end from college. He was a wide receiver early in the college career, maybe in high school as well. But as he sprouted and grew further and further, he had more of a tight end build than he did a wide receiver build, obviously, right? Not a whole lot of 6'5", 236-pound wide receivers walking around, but there are tight ends walking around that space. So, yes, he is a receiving tight end. That is his calling card. That is his way of life. That is his niche, right? He is a receiving tight end. So, clearly, at 6'5", he's a really big-time red zone threat. He's a natural size mismatch in the secondary. And I love the fact that he understands, and I think this comes from his dad and his tutelage and his coaching, being brought up through the ranks of his high school and college career. He has an advanced understanding of his zone coverage and where to appear and where to show up in zone coverage as a tight end in his rookie year. I think that's really where he flourished, right? And mind you, the protection was completely horrid and porous, so he didn't have a whole lot of opportunities. He didn't have a gang of them. But for the times he had an ability to be a quick outlet for Justin Herbert utilized it as much as he possibly could. Until people start really honing in on the idea of trying to cover him because he knew he couldn't get to the receiver reads because he want to be pressured in 2.5 seconds, if not earlier. So, that's more of a defensive scheme chess match thing that coaches were doing. But, he was a breath of fresh air, when he got on the field. And imagine he didn't play the first two games for some reason, healthy scratches. But when he got on the field, he had like a 5 or 6 week stretch that he was just dominant. And again, I think people kind of started to hone in on the idea of kind of bracketing him and just playing one-on-one coverage with the wide receivers, because we know we can hold them up, for more than 2 seconds. They won't go get the ball because Justin Herbert's gonna be running for his life. So yeah, that's the conversation, and that's what you had to deal with in 2025. But I think despite all that, Oronde showed flashes of the idea that he can be really good and as a tight end on this particular team, in this particular regime. So I love his attributes. I love his skill set. I love his lineage. His just ability to play tight end as a whole. So I think that him is, from a receiving perspective, is premium. I think he's going to be a really good player in this league. I think he should be able to build on his campaign for 2025 and have a more stable online, hopefully, and having Mike McDaniel calling plays in this particular conversation. I think he's going to be really, really advantageous for him to be able to flourish and be even better in 2026 than he did in 2025. So I think all signs point to Oronde's stock rising in 2026, assuming that everything works out in the space it's supposed to work out in. But I look at this from a perspective. I think Mike McDaniel looks at Oronde like he looked at Darren Waller in Miami, and how we can just utilize him in certain spaces, certain avenues, and you just scheme up things, to make him a mismatch and make him available. And he could ultimately score a lot of touchdowns. So if you're a fantasy football player, I'm here to tell you that if you're looking for a tight end later on in the draft, pick up Oronde Gadsden. I think he's going to be really rich for you. I think if you had Darren Waller or any tight end that Mike McDaniel had, and Jonnu Smith in a lot of spaces, in the last couple of years, and he definitely had a good run for you, I think you could be in for another one with Oronde Gadsden. I really do. I think that his attributes speak to the idea that he can be a high volume production guy and give you a lot of points and put up a lot of numbers in the receiving room. So that's my positive side of his, development, and his positive side of his abilities. Now, areas I think he needs to improve on, obviously inline blocking. I think that he still needs to work on the idea that he needs to be a better blocker. And I think he needs to do that and build on that. And I think twofold. I think that he still needs to improve on this aspect of it. And is this reason why they brought in David Njoku in, because they needed to get better in that space, because David Njoku is a complete tight end. He blocks well, he receives well, he does it all. So I think that they brought him in to improve that aspect of the tight end room, one, and to basically mentor and guess you can say take Oronde under his wing, in a sense, to get him better in that conversation. I think he needs that. I think David Njoku was a really good addition to the team for that particular fold. He's going to be an asset on the field and an asset to Oronde and getting him better as an inline blocker game to game. Also think he needs to be better at game to game. I think he has some consistency problems, in a sense. I mean, a lot of rookies do. I mean, I'm not going to say and act like it's the end of the world because he did not produce for 17 games or 15 because he didn't play the first 2. But I do believe that if his consistency level, assuming that he's able to get the opportunities that he's going to be able to get, then his consistency game to game and not having these drop-offs and these lulls when he's called upon, in certain spaces. Because there were a couple of games where people were kind of shaking their head, scratching their head, like he had a couple of drops here and there, passes that he normally catches, and, dropping a touchdown here or first down here, or, certain things where he could probably, be effective and normally would be effective. He wasn't, in certain games. So his consistency game can improve. I think that's an area of improvement he can have. And that's maturity, right? I think that comes with maturity. So I think that him being a year 2 and then into a year 3 player, that'll get better with time. But I think that's something he needs to work on. Of course, concentration drops in certain spaces. Sometimes he took his eye off the ball to try to do too much, without the football, and kind of dropped some passes that we thought he should catch, with his frame. He had him right in his hands, 2 hands on it, and just dropped them or fell through his hands, ended up in an interception. Those kind of things, can't have that. He had one pivotal, drop for him and went through his hands, ended up in the defender's hands, and we were going in for a score, changed the complexion of a game for that. So we can't have those type of things. So you got to focus on the concentration drops and bring those passes in, and don't let it end up in turnovers, right? Because you're causing Justin Herbert drives, right? That's a no-no, in the offense. And just focus on being a complete tight end. I think that him being a complete tight end in line with his, abilities to be a better blocker would round out to him being a true tight end 1. Once he gets his blocking and his consistency and the concentration drops under control, I think he will be a complete tight end. But right now, I think he leans on the side of being a more receiving than a complete. So I think that's an area that he needs to improve on. And if his 236 is really true in his weight and what he's walking around as, he probably needs to add about 5 or 10 pounds, in the next year or two. I think he could add 5 to 10 pounds to that frame, that 6'5" frame, just muscle in general, just put on some mass and some bone density. I think he'll be better suited to be a better blocker as well. I think his weight and his strength, lends to the idea that he needs to improve that more, build more in his body and his frame to be a true complete tight end. I think he needs to do all of those things. And I think ultimately in the long term, he will be the tight end one for this team. I'm not saying it won't be this year. It might be, I guess you could say, a tight end by committee conversation, maybe between him and David for sure. But I think that ultimately the ultimate goal, the long-term goal is for him to be tight end one if he improves these areas. So I love his upside. I love his abilities. I think he just need to get better in this space. And I think there will be no question he'll be the unequivocal tight end one when all things are all said and done. So I love the future of having him on the team for sure. For sure. So next up is the guy we talked about a little bit before with Oronde, is David Njoku. Again, he's a long stint with the Cleveland Browns, and, kind of wasted away his talent in my perspective. I wish we had got him 2 or 3 years ago. I would have loved to have him in that conversation when Hunter Henry left. If he came in when Hunter Henry left, that would have been a really good handoff. Lost Hunter Henry, got him. I think that would have been a great addition, and we probably still would have had him today instead of getting him, as he's been, abused in Cleveland, and just been underutilized and abused, and just putting all that wear and tear on his body and get no good results out of it. But yeah, I mean, great tight end. I love his game. I've always loved his game, and him being able to flourish in Cleveland with such uncertainty there tells you that he's a really good player. 6'4", 246 pounds, a really good, complete and prototypical body style for a tight end. For sure. I feel like he's a complete tight end. Obviously, he's good at blocking. He's a really underrated pass catcher because, again, what he was able to do in Cleveland, despite the dysfunction, tells you that he can get it done. He's really strong at the catch point. He's great at contested catches. If you get him one-on-one in the red zone, especially against a safety, even a linebacker or a corner, good luck. Good luck. His strength, his body style, his positioning, his ability to get the air quote rebound position on you when you're trying to bring down a contested catch, it's something to behold. It's something to behold for sure. So David Njoku, ladies and gentlemen, is definitely going to be a weapon for this offense. I know Mike McDaniel loves the idea of having him, and if I had to put money on it right here and right now, especially on, I guess you can say those balance downs. What I mean by balance downs is this: first and second down, 10 or 5 yards to go. That intermediate to long-ish type of conversation when you get into first and second down. Those are balance downs where you can either run or you pass, right? So in those balance downs where you want to be, I guess you can say, mysterious in what you want to do, you put David Njoku on the field right here, right now, because you don't give away a tell with David Njoku on the field as tight end one. You don't, because he can block. They can run the ball effectively with him being on the end line as a tight end one, or they can throw the ball. They really can, because he's the threat in either avenue right here, right now, and he's ready to go. Assuming he stays healthy, that's the only real big time knock that I have on him is his injury history, right? And I don't know if that's the fact that he just was in Cleveland and they just didn't know what to do with him. They didn't know how to monitor him, how to utilize him, how to balance his abilities and his play. But if he can stay healthy, if they had a lot of right here and right now today and play a football game today, David Njoku was tight end one, because there's no tell on first and second down. Now, you're going to throw OG out there on third down clearly because he's a good receiving threat. But if you put OG on the field and you have questions about his blocking ability, you're going to give away a tell that you're likely going to pass the ball from Mike McDaniel's perspective, I think. That's just my perspective. You can lean to the idea of if a Gadsden's on the field, I'm screaming as a defense, it's likely looking at the pass, but Gadsden's on the field. But if Njoku's on the field by himself, and it's a smaller package, 21 personnel, 12 personnel, 13 personnel. If they're on the field in that conversation, they're looking at a conversation where they can do either or. Especially out of 11 personnel, that kind of 21 personnel, that kind of thing. They can do either one. So I think that David Njoku is the I guess you can say the leader in the clubhouse of being tight end one right now. Right now, it just depends on how well Oronde develops in this offseason as a better blocker. And it's going to take getting, tutelage from Njoku in order to get better at that, on top of adding, some size to his frame, because he's 10 pounds lighter than Njoku is right now. He needs to get what Njoku is. 6'5", 246. He's 6'4", 246. He's ready. He's in line to be a really good tight end. He's a complete guy. So if he can get to that conversation, he's going to be tight end one, going forward. But here right now, if you want to be mysterious as a Mike McDaniel play caller, you put David Njoku on the field because I don't know what you're going to do. You can do either or. There's no tell. There's definitely a tell right now with Oronde Gadsden on the field. So we got to clean that up. So it's not obvious of what you want to do in that space. You want to be mysterious and keep defensive guessing. That is the name of the game as offensive coordinator. I know it well. You keep me guessing, then I can definitely have to play you more honest. But if I know what you're going to do, I'm going to make it hell for you. That's always been my mode, and that's always good defensive coordinators' modes and their mindset. So be on the lookout for that and be leery of that because I think that is what the offense is going to look like if they aren't comfortable with Oronde Gadsden's blocking ability. Let me say it that way. So that is a positive, and that is attributes that are positive for the team. What things he need to prove on, what areas is really durability and availability. He has all the tools to be a complete and tight end one for the team. He has all the abilities. His durability and his availability. Can he be durable for 17 games, and can he be available for 17 games? Can he play it all? We don't necessarily have to have him on every single snap, right? Because you got Oronde, you got Charlie Kolar, right, to fill in the void. But if you want to go multiple tight end sets, if you want to go 3 tight end sets because you want to run the ball heavy or just be mysterious in the pass game because you want to be able to run out Njoku and Oronde in the space to kind of fool the defense, make them go heavier on their defense side of the ball, and then we throw the ball with those tight ends, those big body tight ends, that's fine, but he needs to be on the field. If you can be durable and available for those 17 games and give us, a majority, 80 to 90% of that at least, I think that's a win. I would really think that's a win because he's older, and if you are hurt in your early in the career, it doesn't typically get better, right? But if he can get through a whole season without being really banged up, that's going to be a win for the Chargers. And I like our chances at this offense being really good if he's on the field with Oronde and company going forward. So I love the fact that they added him. And he's going to be really good for this team. We just need him to stay on the field. Bottom line. So last up is Charlie Kolar. Coming over from the Ravens, he was with his brother. He's with Jim's brother John, in Baltimore for his first part of his career. Mainly a blocker. We didn't see a whole lot of flashes, a whole lot of conversation with, him being a receiver in a sense. Really good blocking tight end. Now he's great at that. And 6'6", really big body tight end, 265, strong, tall, has underrated athleticism. And a man loves the block. It's not many people you can find. You can walk around the town and look for NFL players, right, and say, hey, do you like blocking as a tight end? But he likes to do it. And it's a mindset, it is his mantra, it is his calling card, it is his niche. He loves to do it. So when he's on the field, I promise you, Oronde Gadsden and Kamani Vidal and company, Keith Mitchell, Jared Patterson, whoever is carrying the football is going to love the fact that Charlie Kolar is going to be blocking because he's going to get it done. He's going to get it done. Only question is, can he develop himself into a receiver, to be a threat in that space? Because I promise you this, if Charlie Kolar has a hidden talent of being a good receiver that nobody has unlocked yet or nobody bothered to even tap into, this team is going to really be in for a good run offensively because you're going to sit here and tell me if Kolar is a good receiver and he doesn't have any issues receiving the football, he can do it just as well or almost to the level of Njoku or Oronde. That bodes well for McDaniel's offense because you got 3 good tight ends and the receivers you got and the running backs you got who can catch the ball out of the backfield. That's a lot of weapons. This might be, if that is the case, this might be the first time that Justin Herbert has really a good, overwhelmingly good offensive prowess and weaponry on his side of the ball. This personnel on the offensive side of football is going to be the best he's ever had. I really believe that. If Charlie Kolar develops into a receiver on top of being a good blocking tight end, look out because you got 3 good receiving tight ends. I would argue 4 to 5 good receivers, 3, 4 running backs. That's the best Justin Herbert's ever had from a weaponry perspective. It is. And I still think they should add another wide receiver. So that'll make 7. So yeah, I think that's going to be really good for Justin Herbert's ability. And not only will you have good players, but you have depth. So even if people go down or have to miss a game here and there, you don't miss a beat. You don't miss a beat. So I like the fact that if they can unlock that from Charlie Kolar on top of him being a good blocker, because again, with him being on the field is a different tell than it is for Oronde. Because if Kolar's on the field by himself, they want to run the ball. That's definitely a tell. But if you can unlock that receiving aspect of it, and people start to see that and say, well, shit, we gotta cover him on top of covering everybody else because he can catch the football out of the tight end spot too. we got a problem. So yeah, if there's no tell with Kolar, Oronde, and Njoku, there's a lot of chess pieces that Mike McDaniel can move around to just make the defensive life hell. Just gonna be real about it. Just gonna be real about it. But we have to see it first. We haven't seen it yet. Didn't see it in Baltimore, which could be a byproduct of the system, or he just doesn't do it well. Or if he does do it well, you just haven't seen it yet. Kudos to the Chargers for seeing it and paying for it and having it under the radar and under their hat, and they're going to reveal it in 2026, and they're going to put fright into the defense in a lot of spaces. That's all I can say. But getting into his areas of improvement, like I said, he just got to prove that he can be a receiving threat. You know, he's durable, he's tall, strong, and really block really well. So they line up in those 13 personnels, one running back, 3 tight ends, and they try to run the football, or if they can kind of sneak out and do some play action and get Kolar, OG, and Njoku in space and try to catch the football with a receiver on the outside, you know, and a running back in the backfield, that's going to bode well for a lot of mismatches against linebackers, because you put 3 tight ends on the field, they're going to have to put more linebackers on the field, and they're going to have hell covering a 6'4", 6'5", and 6'6" tight ends in the pass game. So good luck. Good luck with that. Ain't a whole lot of linebackers in this league that can do that. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. It is what it is. So yeah, that's gonna bode well for the conversation of the Chargers if all these guys can catch the football. We know David Njoku can block and catch. We know OG can catch. Can Kolar do both? That is the question. But we know that he can do one, OG can do the other, and David Njoku can do all 3. You know, well, at least 2, maybe 3 if he's going to be available and not be injured. So we'll see. But yes, I definitely like what they're doing from a tight end perspective. So if all 3 guys pan out and they stay healthy, I like the tight end room in the 2026 campaign, and them being coached by Mike McDaniel and him unlocking their best abilities. It's going to be good for Justin Herbert, as long as you can protect him. And speaking of that, we're going to be talking about the offensive line next. As we get into our coverage, we're going to do the offensive line next. This is Tuesday, so we're going to talk about them on Thursday, and we're going to break down exactly what the offensive line looks like and who I think is going to be the starters. I'm going to focus in on who I think is going to be the starters, and maybe we'll do a little bit of reserve work, but I'm definitely going to talk about the tackles, the center, and who I think is going to start at guards, who I think needs to start at guards, and who they got in the fold right now and what their pluses and minuses are. We'll get into all of that. So we'll break that down, and we'll be done with offense at that point. And then next week, we'll forward over to the defense and get that rolling. So we'll get that going and get that done. And hopefully we'll wrap this up between now and time training camp starts, and then we'll get into that coverage. So got a lot of things rolling for the ESP network. I'm going to say ESPN because they're not affiliated with the channel at all. ESP, Electric Shock Podcast. So that is going to do it for our tight end review. But if you're looking for the Electric Shock Podcast in any space and any time, we can be found on all these platforms. Hit the subscribe button to support our podcast movement. Hit us up on social media about questions about the Chargers news. We can be found on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Gmail. The handle is Electric Shock Pod, at Electric Shock Pod with no K on all platforms. So please get at us for all things Chargers. But in the meantime, between time, we got to do one thing and one thing well. You always got to remember to boat up.